When I left the religion of Jehovah's Witnesses, I thought the hard part was over. I thought I could finally be myself, date women, and live happily ever after. But here's what nobody told me. Leaving a religion doesn't automatically erase all the things that it taught you about your body, your desires, and your worth. And if you don't heal those things, they're going to follow you into every relationship that you have, and definitely into the bedroom. Today I'm sharing the biggest mistakes I made when coming out of a high-control evangelical Christian religion, and how I went from shame and shutdown and guilt to enjoying sex and intimacy with women without apology. By the way, I'm Danny. I'm a somatic sexologist, and I help self-aware lesbians and AFAB folks transform intimacy blocks into playful, deep connection so that they can finally have the intimacy that they're craving in and out of the bedroom. So mistake number one that I made is believing that my relationships would change just because I left the church. I look back and I can see how naive I was and full of hope and excitement, which makes a lot of sense. And I thought to myself, I'm free now. I can date women. I can finally be myself. It's going to be so awesome. And parts of it were. But a lot of it was really hard, because here's the truth. Leaving the environment doesn't remove the environment from you. The teachings of Jehovah's Witnesses still lived in my body. What do I mean by that? The idea that homosexuality is a sin, that sex is between a man and a woman in marriage, premarital sex is wrong and bad, that my desire is dangerous and can lead me to temptation, that my body can be defiled by sex and I could become dirty and need to be washed clean of sin. And also that my body as a woman is responsible for men acting poorly or acting quote-unquote ungodly. If they're tempted by me, if they have sexual thoughts about me, if they're attracted to me, if they're staring at me, that's my fault. So these aren't just ideas. It's a whole philosophy of how you understand yourself and your body, how you relate to those around you, how you move through the world. It shapes your entire reality. Even if you no longer believe these things logically, they still are shaping your worldview. They are still quietly shaping how you relate to your body, how you feel before, during, and after queer sex, how free you feel to fully express yourself and your desires in your relationships. So I'm not a techie person, but it makes me think of updating your phone. So you can select automatically update the phone, but in this case, there are no automatic updates. You have to intentionally search for an update, install the software, and reboot. So you can't expect to just come out of a high control religion, have all your philosophies updated just because you walked out the doors. If you don't intentionally look for those old patterns and beliefs, like shame around your desire or that guilt that you feel after intimacy, these patterns will keep running in the background. And it took me a long time to realize this. For example, I said, I could have sex with women, but I could never be in a relationship with one. And I cringe just thinking about that, because now it's so clear to me that looking back, there was so much internalized misogyny from the religion, that you need a man to lead, to provide, that women are so emotional and erratic, and you need a man to balance you out. So I didn't consciously think those things. I identified then and still do as a feminist, right? But even in the ways that I would think about women, they were colored with all that religious dogma. Pretty soon after I left Jehovah's Witnesses, I immediately identified as bi. And to people still in the group, they would think, oh, see, she left God's way and suddenly she's some kind of depraved hedonist sleeping with anyone who comes around. But here's the thing. When your family, your community, your friends, your eternal salvation is on the line, your brain and body learns to shove those feelings deep, deep, deep down. So in the religion, there was no space to question my sexuality. So it naturally stayed buried. And once I left, it came busting through the surface like a buoy breaking through the water. To other people, it seemed sudden. But to me, it felt like I could finally breathe and let this part of me start to come to the surface. That part of me was shy and had been shamed for so long. It took time for that part to feel comfortable enough to fully show up. By the way, if you're already noticing yourself in some of these stories, I created a free quiz to help you pinpoint exactly how your body is blocking intimacy and how to start reconnecting again. I'll link that below. Biggest mistake of them all that I made is not addressing internalized homophobia. I remember there was one time, I think I was in first grade, and my friend came over to spend the night, and my mom caught us making out in my bed. It was a waterbed because those used to be really popular. But I just remember my mom opened the door, took the girl's hand, led her out to the couch to sleep away from me, and when I woke up, the girl was gone. My mom never spoke to me about it, never addressed it, never said anything. Even then, I just knew that what had happened was bad and wrong, because even though I wasn't old enough to fully comprehend the church's teachings on homosexuality, it was in the jokes the adults made, right? The faces, the comments, the silence around what my mom caught me doing. So I didn't even know that term, internalized homophobia, until after my marriage with a man ended. And from the time that I learned about it, I could look back and see it everywhere in my past and in my present self. Just an easy definition for internalized homophobia is the way that negative ideas about queerness, in this case from religious dogma, gets imprinted into your mind, your body, your heart, your soul. That queer intimacy is invalid, it's less than, it's wrong, it's sinful. It doesn't carry as much weight as straight intimacy. And often this comes with a huge helping of self-loathing and shame and low self-worth. And this goes back to that example I shared a few minutes ago about never being able to be in a relationship with a woman. Not only was that internalized misogyny, it was also internalized homophobia, all mixed in together. Because I was still relating to a queer relationship as if it could not be enough. It was not real enough. It's not substantial enough to take the place of a straight relationship. And for me, it also showed up as shame crashing down after intimacy. Whether I was having sex with a partner or masturbating to queer porn, I would just have this pit in my stomach of shame, like disgust and throwing up. I just felt so like my skin was crawling. Masturbation was referenced as self-abuse in the church. So not self-pleasure, right? Not self-touch, self-abuse. So not only did I feel like my impulse to touch myself, give myself pleasure, explore my body, not only did I feel like that was wrong, but then you add on top my desires and impulses toward queerness. So I was double wrong and double bad. So I developed this fear of my desires and my impulses and my natural instincts toward what felt good for my body. And my internalized homophobia also showed up as avoiding certain positions in bed that I thought were too queer or too outside the heteronormative positions. Again, I'm not consciously having this sentence, but the feeling of self-monitoring during sex sounded like, oh, if a man and woman wouldn't do this position or they wouldn't have sex like this, then I shouldn't have sex like this. I can't have sex like this. It felt like if I had sex in a way that was outside of the heteronormative script that I had become accustomed to, then I was coloring too far outside the lines. And to my nervous system, that felt dangerous. Because in the past, when I was in the religion, being too far outside the lines meant that I would be noticed and punished and condemned. There was a lot riding on doing intimacy the way that I was supposed to, quote unquote, the way that God would have wanted me to, according to the church. Also wanted to expand on this idea of self-monitoring. This was really encouraged as a way to make sure that all the followers were keeping themselves in line, because I was taught to fear my thoughts, that the devil could creep in at any time and start making me maybe feel lustful or starting to have doubts about the church. And I want to talk for a minute about thought crime. If you were in a high control group, you have definitely experienced this, even if you're not familiar with that exact term. So thought crime, as in even thinking something, right? Not doing it, but even thinking it is a sin. And a lot of us know we can't control our thoughts. We can control how we react to them, right? But we have random thoughts that pop in and out of our mind thousands and thousands a day. So the precedent is set that the things we can't control, which is what pops into our mind, those things are a sin. So that's already a really tricky place to be in. There's that one scripture that says, If a man looks at a woman so as to have a desire for her, he's already committed adultery in his heart. If a man even looks at a woman and be like, yeah, she's hot, or just has a thought about her that he can't control, or any person, right? This isn't really about gender. But even that thought is adultery, which is a cardinal sin. I was being conditioned to be hyper vigilant about the devil coming into my mind, and that self-monitoring and that fear of my own thoughts and of my own desires carried over after I left into my intimacy. Am I doing this right? Is this okay? Is it okay to want this? Is it okay to say this? Is it okay to think this? And it really took me out of the moment, and is one of the reasons I had such a hard time consistently orgasming with a partner for so long. Geniusly, my mind and body learned to distance themselves from each other. And what I mean by that is, from the neck down, I felt numb. And that was my body's genius way of keeping me safe and keeping me in the group, to not lose that belonging, which is essential to human well-being, until a time came when I felt supported enough and ready enough and emotionally resilient enough to leave and choose myself and my desires over the religion. This disconnection that was already naturally happening for safety inside of me was reinforced within this religious group because it made it easier to control me and control the other followers. For example, if there was a teaching from the organization that didn't sit right with me, I'd quickly push it away with the reasoning that, well, God's thoughts are higher than our thoughts. We can't possibly understand with our measly human minds God's ways. Questions were discouraged and punished, because if anyone got a sense that you were starting to doubt or disagree, you would be counseled by the elders. And sometimes, if you were trying to talk to other people in the congregation about your questions or your doubts, they would then label you as someone dangerous to be around, and they would admonish the rest of the congregation to be careful about hanging out with you. And then suddenly you would be iced out by everyone because you were labeled a danger to their faith. That happened to my family a few times, and I saw it happen to other people as well. So bringing all this back to my sexuality, that same disconnection is what kept me from understanding my sexuality. So at the heart of all these mistakes is this: I didn't trust my body. In this religion, I learned that the mind is holy, and the body, the desires of the flesh, quote unquote, are dangerous. A trap, something that you have to always be on guard against, not to succumb to, and can lead you astray, away from God, into the hands of the devil. Everything changed when I developed what I now call body trust, which is the skill of listening to, trusting, and working with your body instead of against it. This allowed me to follow my body's signals and desires, not only to my authentic sexuality, but on an even wider scale to create a life that felt good for me, not just follow what I had been told. So when you have body trust, you are fully aware of what feels good and what doesn't, what feels true and what doesn't. And then you become harder to control. You now have this internal compass, so instead of outsourcing your decisions about who you want to love, who you want to fuck, what kind of life you want to have, instead of outsourcing that to people or pastors or systems that claim to have your best interest at heart, you are able to feel what feels true and aligned for you. So I'm going to break down how you can create body trust so that you can feel comfortable in your authentic sexual expression, and so you can never be taken advantage of by people in power again. Step 1 is noticing your body's signals before they start screaming at you. I want to begin to notice your hunger before you're starving. Notice when you have to go to the bathroom before you're about to pee your pants. Notice that first wave of sadness before you burst into tears or start screaming in anger. So noticing these subtle signals builds that muscle of awareness to combat the shutdown and disconnection from being in a high control group. So step 2 is responding to these signals with curiosity. And this is showing your body that it's safe to speak up and that your body is worth listening to. That's how trust is built. And again, when you have that trust, you're able to sense what you really want and trust that what you want is okay and good. So you have the noticing, you have the responding with curiosity to your body signals. Step 3 is collaborating with your body to create the experiences that you actually want in sex and intimacy and relationships. So that could look like telling your partner that you want to switch positions instead of just lying there staring at the ceiling waiting for it to be over. It could look like speaking up and saying, hey, actually, that really hurt my feelings. I'm not okay with being treated that way. So when you feel safe in your body, pleasure stops feeling dangerous, but instead pleasure becomes a compass, guiding you toward relationships and a life that feels the most exciting for you. And this is exactly what I help my clients do. And it's the first pillar of my feral connection method. Safety in your body is just the start. Most practitioners think that safety is the finish line. It is not. So what do you do once you are feeling safe? Then what? From there, we want to expand your menu of options in intimacy so you can actually discover what really turns you on, and we can process the guilt and shame around that. Because a lot of times when you're coming from a very strict religious background, you have sex between a man and a woman in missionary for procreation, and there's very little variation of what is allowed. If you're anything like me, I didn't even know what was possible to ask for, what was possible to do, what was possible to feel. I was so limited in my experience, even in my imagination was limited. So you want to build out your pleasure pathway so you can access your arousal whenever you want. And then you want to build the confidence to ask for what you want in a way that is honest and vulnerable and sexy, because yes, it can be all of those things. Speaking up is often a challenge coming from a really religious background because we are taught to keep our voices small, to fall in line, to follow the leader, and to basically agree with everyone else is saying, or else we feel the sting of being an outcast. So you really want to practice expressing your authentic needs, wants, desires, and feelings. And these all form the building blocks of intimacy that you are excited about. So body trust opens the door, but it's just the beginning of fully stepping into your queerness and self-acceptance and even self-love. If any part of my story feels familiar, if you've left any type of high control group or church and you still feel the shame living in your body, you don't have to navigate it alone. If you're ready for deeper, more personalized support and start reconnecting to your body in a way that feels joyful and pleasurable, click the second link to apply to your own private one-on-one intimacy immersion with me. This isn't the same dynamic where there's a preacher on the stage and you're on the bench listening. The goal of these intimacy immersions is for both of us to show up as ourselves, as imperfect humans. It's really an arena to build the intimacy skills that you didn't get a chance to build because your queerness was shamed for so long. And if you take anything from this video, please know that your existence, the way that you love, the way that you desire, is not a sin, and you deserve connection that lights you up inside, even if it feels scary right now.